achieves liberation. My dear wife, he says, well, Sambada Varshana no pi heyayak. Oh, this is a
We're
prior verse,
discussing
but
9-8. So we're discussing 9, 8, 12 to 13, right, today?
Oh, okay. Yep. No wonder. Wrong volume. Be right there. Maybe pause the recording for a moment until we get this straightened out.
I can project you on the screen the verses. Is that okay for you?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Na sadhu va muni kopa brajita nirpendra putra iti sattva damani kata tamo rasamayam vibhava yate jagat pavitramani ki rajo bhuva. It is sometimes argued that the sons of King Sagar were burned to ashes by fire emanating from the eyes of Kalpa Muni. This statement, however, is not approved by great learned persons, for Kalpa Muni's body is completely in the mode of goodness, and therefore cannot manifest the mode of ignorance in the form of anger, just as the pure sky cannot be polluted by the dust of the earth. Kapila Muni enunciated in this material world the Sankhya philosophy, which is a strong boat with which to cross over the ocean of nescience. Indeed, a person eager to cross the ocean of the material world may take shelter of this philosophy. In such a great learned person situated on the elevated platform of transcendence, how can there be any distinctions between enemy and friend? And I'm going to let you read the purport.
Purport. By the Bhakti Center purport. One who is promoted to the transcendental platform Brahma Bhutam is always jubilant, prasannatma. He is unaffected by the false distinctions between good and bad in the material world. Therefore, such an exalted person is Samaha Sarveshu Bhuteshu, that is to say, he is equal toward everyone, not distinguishing between friend and enemy. Because he is on the absolute platform, free from material contamination, he is called Paratma Bhuta or Brahma Bhuta. Kapila Muni, therefore, was not at all angry at the sons of Sagara Maharaj. Rather, they were burned to ashes by the heat of their own bodies.
Now, in the Old Testament, I was brought up Jewish, and in the Old Testament, when we read about God, there's a beautiful sections of the prayers that Jews put in the mezuzah, a little prayer box on the door of their house. These are all prayers of devotion and love of God. Thou shalt love thy Lord with all thy heart, with all thy might. These are the prayers of the Old Testament. Yet, when we read some of the Old Testament, we do wonder if God has an anger management problem. I will smite you, and I will smite your smiters. And you, by the way, how about you turn into a pillar of salt? It seems to have it. So the Old Testament seems to have this dichotomy where you have the loving God on one hand, and on the other hand, you have what appears to be an anger management problem. Now, I'm going back to a line of the purport. So, here we're saying God is equal to everyone. And then you have an angry God favoring one group over another. So how do we explain this? Well, let's go to our tradition, which we have a greater dependence on the scripture. Because when Lord Chaitanya debated the Kazi, though he pointed out there was defects in the tradition the Kazi came from. Similarly, I found my tradition taught me that I ought to respect, sometimes fear, but what attracted me when I was growing up was there was love there. And what brings us, I'm speaking now at the Bhakti Center. It's a place of love. We want to offer love, but anger is a concomitant factor. So now, when we're dealing with the Old Testament, I'm not an Old Testament scholar, so I won't say too much, but we have this combination of love and anger. And why, when I grew up reading it, did I find the anger disturbing? Can anybody guess why I found the anger disturbing? Anyone like to unmute and take a guess?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I mean,
yes.
I know it's, in my case anyway, it's hard to accommodate simultaneously the fact that somebody is angry with you and also loves you. So anger can often feel like a dearth of love.
Okay. Any other suggestions?
Hare Krishna, Brahmatirtha Prabhu.
Yes, yes.
For me, it always felt like an abusive
Hare
parent
Krishna.
situation.
Like an abuse.
Like a abusive parent kind of thing, where they're like happy with you as long as you're doing what you want them to do, but then as soon as you kind of like get them angry a little bit, like they get really, really angry and they like just wallop you and you just, get the belt. So I don't know. It just was not something I cared for. I liked Jesus and Mary better.
Got it. Any other comment?
Anger on the part of God is disturbing because that may suggest that he's not in control.
Yeah.
Something is not going his way.
Yeah. Now, at the same time, we're talking about God, I assume, and there's a beautiful bhakti tradition in there. So my own conclusion, after I studied the Gita, and certainly my conclusion, again, I'm not a scholar on this area, but we're talking about a scripture written for those in a mode of passion or even ignorance. And in passion, what's the one symptoms? There are friends and there are enemies. We see America's become a country of absolute passion now. There are friends and there are enemies. You're a Republican, you're a Democrat. You're this, you're that. You're a vaxxer, or you're an anti-vaxxer. Everything becomes friends and enemies. And so when we're dealing with a scripture that is for people who are in the lower modes of nature, we find friends and enemies. And we find the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam also goes into you get some pretty nasty stuff in there. If you commit this sin, you'll be thrown in a lake of fire. Sound pretty biblical to me. If you commit that sin, you'll embrace a molten body. If you do this sin, all these little creatures will spend a long time biting you. So you have little pieces of that in the 5th canto. Now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he analyzed it, said that the purpose of that, not that we necessarily take these things literally, but there's a percentage of the population that you have to scare. You got to get them a little scared, otherwise they won't behave. So the Bible is preaching to a people who are very passionate, friends, enemies, like that. And in that way, the way God is projected, it comes out in that very mode of passion way. So I'm not criticizing and saying that this scripture or that scripture may not be valid or bona fide. I mean, there's certainly truth in there, but I am saying it's intended for an audience that is in a real fighting mood. If there are Vedic Shastras that are intended for Kshatriyas, and they can get one pretty riled up, because Kshatriyas must see friends and enemies. When Arjuna refused to see friends and enemies, he couldn't fight. Krishna preaches to him, "You're not this body." First he's telling him he's a coward. Then he tells him, "You're not this body." And Arjuna realizes, well, nobody's this body. Why should I be fighting? And so Krishna has to convince him, first, you're not this body, but you have a duty. Act on this out of your duty. Now, if Krishna had come up and instead given the heavy mode of passion arguments, maybe Arjuna would have fought too. These are your enemies. They've ruined everything. You must kill them, blah, blah, blah. If Krishna had spoken in a less philosophical way, probably would have got him riled up, but it would not have spiritually advanced his cause. So one can fight and act as if they're in a mode of passion, motivated by the highest duty to God, or one can do the same thing in a mode of passion, kind of appealing to our ego. I got to be on the winning side. So all of this depends on the modes of nature we're looking at. In this case, we're looking at Brahma Bhuta. And Brahma Bhutas are jubilant, prasanatma. They're happy. They're not affected by the false distinctions of good or bad. Because Kapila Muni was on the absolute platform, he was not angry at the offenses. And in fact, there's this, if I am a qualified Brahmin and I curse you, and the curse doesn't work, it comes right back to me. Therefore, it behooves us to be kind to everyone as much as possible, because one of the lessons in this verse is ill words we speak of others can come back and bite us in a place where we sit, and that's not very comfortable. So it's another lesson in here. Now, all of us experience anger, and in this class I had some themes, and again I apologize for being late. I couldn't pull up my references, but we'll do it from my head. All of us will experience anger. Prabhupada would experience anger. So how do we distinguish anger that we ought to have from anger that's driven by the mode of passion? Kapila Muni was not at all angry for an offense that was done. Yet sometimes we'll see great saints get angry. Now Devarsa Muni got very angry when he went to see Maharaj Ambarish. And Maharaj Ambarish had a dilemma. Devarsi arrived at his home, and he had been fasting for the Ekadasi. And in order to break the fast, he has to do something, take a little sip of water at the auspicious time. And but it was an offense to eat before his guest ate. So what happened? Devarsa Muni went off to bathe, and while he was bathing, it was the auspicious times, instead of eating it, took a little sip of water. Devarsa Muni, being a very, very powerful sadhu, then went and put a curse on Ambarish. And of course, that didn't work very well. And the curse bounced back to to Devarsa Muni, who traveled all, even to Lord Vishnu. How do I get rid of this curse? And the only way to do it was to take shelter at the feet of Ambarish. So Ambarish again didn't get angry, but Devarsa Muni got angry in the mode of passion. Now, we're going to talk about anger for a moment, the mode of goodness, because there are times when we see a great saint gets angry. Who was a great saint who was a little boy who got very angry and it was justified? Can somebody tell me?
Dhruva Maharaj.
Yes, and why was he angry?
Because his father's other wife told him that he did not deserve on his father's lap to sit on his father's lap, and he would have to take birth again in her womb. And then even more, when he went to his mother, she said, you know what, she's right. You have to go to the forest.
But another reason he got angry, why was he killing all the demons, Rakshasas?
Wasn't it because they killed his brother or something like that?
Yep. They had unnecessarily killed someone, so he went off to get rid of these people who just kill innocent people. Like sometimes in Mayapur, we have cobras appearing, and somebody has to kill them. Sometimes a cobra even can crawl out of the toilet, which is quite disconcerting. And somebody kill it because the cobra has an envious nature and it's going to bite someone and kill them. So it's justified. So Dhruva's anger was justified, but when Narada Muni stopped them from killing all the Rakshasas because it was excessive. He was doing too much of it. He was justified in that he was preventing these Rakshasas from killing other innocent people, but he was doing it too much. Even Rakshasas need a place. We would not want to kill all the cobras every place, just the ones that are going to be biting someone. And we have that story of the Kaliya serpent and Garuda, but there's not time for me to tell that one now. But that deals with the same issue. You can't. Every living entity is entitled to some place. Just not, they can't excessively take it over. Just like nowadays we have invasive species growing every place. So we have to remove them because it will destroy the ecosystem. But there's a place for invasive species, but that's where they came from, not here. So in a similar way, we can have anger and we can have excess anger. Dhruva had justified anger, but it turned into excess anger. As ordinary devotees, my own experience is when we have anger, it easily turns into excess anger. We have anger because we think things aren't fair. It's not fair that an innocent person was killed by Rakshasa in the Dhruva story. Other matters aren't fair. And when it's not fair, we have anger. We just had in America, George Floyd. A cop knelt on his neck for 9 minutes. People felt that just isn't fair. Guy's on the ground, he's surrounded by cops. You don't kneel on his neck. And it's not fair. So people get angry. Sometimes they riot and they get excessively angry. So how do we distinguish excessive anger from reasonable anger? And in the case of a complete sadhu, they may not experience any anger, yet Prabhupada would experience anger. I'm bewildered now. Can someone help me out with this? I hate to end the class at this point with bewilderment. Who can help me with this one?
I'm just thinking that maybe anger crosses the line when it becomes self-indulgent, rather than for the welfare of others. it becomes to gratify your own mind, then it becomes, I think that's when I would say it becomes excessive.
Okay, any other comments? I like what you said. Well, let's talk about Prabhupada. I noticed this with him. He would get angry sometimes. And seconds later, there was no anger. He got angry for our benefit. We put salt in the Charitamritam instead of sugar. Who did that? Who did that? Prabhupada would say. That person, after hearing Prabhupada say one time who did it, I assure you, the rest of their life, they will never, never do that again. But the anger was gone in a second. It was for our benefit. The anger Prabhupada had, because Prabhupada was situated as Prasanatma, the anger he had was just for our benefit. When Mr. Nair tried to steal the Juhu property, Prabhupada was very angry. Here it is, he's trying to cheat us and steal from Krishna. But the anger dissipated. And even Mrs. Nair came and apologized to Prabhupada for her husband's cheating. So he just wanted to show us, as devotees in India, we were always getting cheated all the time. The mantra merchants would use with us is, "Damn cheap, Babu," which meant they were charging us 4 or 5 times the ordinary price. And Prabhupada knew that. So he wanted to train us not to simply be pushovers. At the same time, he didn't want us to have ordinary anger. Now, I'll tell you a story that puts things in context. When we go to Vrindavan, we're dealing with an unusual place. Vrindavan is not like any other place. When you enter there, if you have the visa to enter Vrindavan, you can see it's a very different place, but you need a visa. What is the visa required? Now, the tourist buses come to Vrindavan, but nobody on there has a visa. So they come to Vrindavan and they leave. It's similar to me as if I flew to New Delhi, didn't have my COVID card, didn't have my visa. What do? In the transit lounge, they tell me, "Sorry, you cannot enter the country. Turn around. Now go home. We don't want you anymore. Go home." So did I actually go to India or did I not go to India? Because I did not have the visa. So similarly, when the many tourist buses come to Vrindavan and the people have not done the punya, the activities necessary to purify the heart, are they really in Vrindavan for those 2 hours? Well, they get some benefit hearing the mantra in the background and all. There's always some benefit. But they really don't have the experience of Vrindavan. Now, if you get the visa and to go to Vrindavan, and there's certain prayer and meditation and purification required, if you get the visa and you can get to Vrindavan, you'll see that the Brijabasis are not ordinary people, but they do ordinary cheating all the time. So the test for me being in India was when I'm in America and the cab driver is cheating me by I know, let's say I'm in New York and I get in a yellow cab and it has a meter. Now I know my way around New York very well. And I say, "I want you to take me to Hoyt Schermerhorn Street in Brooklyn." So the way to get there, if I was at the Bhakti Center, would be to cross the Manhattan Bridge or maybe the Brooklyn Bridge. But let's say I have a wise guy cab driver, and he decides he's going to take the Triborough Bridge. Now, everyone in New York knows that meant he's turning a $5 cab ride into a $100 cab ride. Now, I'm getting cheated. May get angry about it. If you go to Vrindavan, the same thing will happen. I get in the rickshaw. I say, "Take me here." But he takes me the long, long, long way. or charging me 5 times the ordinary rate. So what would I do? In New York, I would tell the cab driver off, I'm going to call the authorities. I have your medallion number. I'm not going to pay it. I'll call the police if you give me a hard blah, blah, blah. I would do some threats. In Vrindavan, there's no such thing. Because in Vrindavan, they're all Brijabashis. So one of the nice experiences of being in Vrindavan, it forces all of us to in this situation and be prasanatma. So when I'm in Vrindavan, I make it a point, no matter what someone does, I don't get angry. Because I don't know who I'm speaking to. I mean, they may be smoking a beedi and listening to Bollywood, but they're born in Vrindavan for a reason. So it gives me a chance to check my anger. So what do I do when I get cheated? Well, every time I'm white-skinned, I go to Vrindavan. Every time I get in a rickshaw, I'll get cheated. So my technique is I start laughing. I say, I want to go to Radha Damodar. 50 rupees. 5 rupees would be high price. 50 rupees. So I just start laughing. I don't get angry. Because I train myself, don't get angry in Vrindavan. And it works. As soon as I start laughing, the price comes down. I just start laughing. Or I'll walk away. And they'll chase me. But it's a real practice in Vrindavan to avoid unnecessary anger. In the West, we could always so easily end up like let's say Vrindavan for a moment, they'll get to the West. We could end up like Durvasa Muni, where we get angry at the wrong person, and the anger bounces back and starts consuming us. And we find if we get over anger, that anger can consume us. We can't even think. Our eyes just turn red, and our brain becomes flooded, and there's just no brain left at all. So, in order to avoid offenses, I very carefully try to avoid getting angry, no matter what happens. And it was such good training for me. Then when I come back to the West, I can meter my anger. When it's needed, I've been in a case of, not that long ago, where somebody was attacking a devotee. We've got a lot of crazy people. For a little guy, I can get pretty darn ferocious. But because of my training in Vrindavan, that anger is only done as needed, just as Prabhupada would only give anger not out of his own motive passion, but just what we needed to get the mission done. So that's some of the lessons here. Again, apologize for being late. An astrologer told me that for computers, Mercury is eating Rahu or something like that. Who knows? But that happened to me. So I'll pause here and see if there are any questions or comments or criticisms, or somebody wants to get angry at me. Go for it.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah, I'm so happy that you're talking about Krishna and his anger management issues, because I ran across something recently that I really needed to get addressed. You know, you were referring earlier to, I think, like fifth canto stuff, and if I don't know if I understood you properly, but it seemed like you were saying that, you have to threaten divas like that when they are in the mode of passion and ignorance in order to get them to fly right, something like that, right?
Well, what I said is there's a little bit in the fifth canto. Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this, and you get in the Judeo-Christian tradition, you have the bhakti prayers and the sections on love, but you also have a lot of Um, it's actually not that much in even the Old or New Testament. If you do this, you're going to go to hell. But you do have the preachers who emphasize that little bit that's there. And so they take a scripture intended for bhakti and make it a scripture intended for a God with a serious anger management problem that you wonder if sometimes God doesn't need to enter a 12-step program for anger management. And my read of the Old or New Testament doesn't give me that impression, but some presenters of it present it in such a way that bhakti disappears. And so my point is that there is anger, and we have to see what mode of nature the anger comes from. In the Old Testament, sometimes I have trouble seeing some of the goodness in it. So it gets caught up in the flowery language of the Vedas. What are the flowery language of the Vedas? We say, Krishna says to Arjuna, do not be bewildered by the flowery language of the Vedas. Well, what is that? That is karma kanda. Karma kanda means you do certain things, you get certain reactions. So it's a ritual. So I do certain rituals, certain prayers. It's like going to Amazon. You give Amazon your credit card, you get a package. So you do your karma kanda, you get some reward, or don't do it right, you get some punishment. It's very kind of biblical in that sense, the karma kanda. So Krishna is saying to Arjuna, rise above the flowery language, means rise above the karma kanda matters. And karma kanda, very much, it's a mode of passion process. And so to rise above it. So does that answer your question, or did I beat around the bush too much?
Well, I was trying to ask that question in order to get to my question, but I'm still not, in your explanation, I'm still not understanding the connection that you're making, for example, between the karma kanda section of the Vedas and Krishna's expressions of this hellfire and brimstone type thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the hellfire and brimstone, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is for ordinary people just to scare them a little bit. Like, for example, sometimes when a child is misbehaving, it's not a good. This is not a good technique for bringing up children, but it's done. Child's misbehaving. And my parents even would do this and say, "Oh, you see that policeman over there? You're 6 years old. The policeman is, looks like he's 12 feet tall. He has a gun and mace and taser and all these things on his belt. And you say, if you misbehave, I'm going to take you to that policeman." I mean, the policeman's not going to do anything but give you a piece of candy. He doesn't care. But you don't know that. And the policeman is so scary. I mean, my son is law enforcement. He went to 4 police academies, and I joke with him, for the 3 months of the academy, the first month they teach you how to walk like a cop. That funny walk they all have, where you kind of like they're going to get you. So that walk, I won't imitate it on the camera, but they do. So I always joke with them, is that what they do for the first month? Teach you how to walk so weird? With their legs a little bowed and funny. Just don't laugh at the cops because they got the gun. Anyway, so sometimes it's like that. A child will say to a parent will say to a child, "Look at that cop. If you misbehave, I'm going to take you to that cop, and he's going to take you to jail." Now, my parents never quite put it that way, but I've seen parents say that. So the cops not going to take him to jail. I mean, nobody's going to go to hell forever and ever and ever. That's not reality. You may get some karma kanda and you may have to suffer, but it's not eternal. That would make God so much worse than people like Hitler or Idi Amin or any of the big modern demons. I mean, the Holocaust, they made people suffer so badly, but it wasn't forever. A few years, and then they would exterminate them. That would be minutes of hell, but not for all eternity. That would make God the meanest person we could ever imagine. So obviously, these things cannot be true, that you go to hell forever, because it would make God the meanest thing. But sometimes there's some hyperbole, meaning some exaggeration used for the sake of getting people to behave. In this wonderful book by Dostoevsky, The Grand Inquisitor, it's a section of a larger book. In it, in the Middle Ages, Jesus reappears in medieval Spain. And he walks the streets and he's giving love to everyone. And everyone he meets, he embraces, and they're just feeling love and joy. And the Grand Inquisitor, which is the ruler, he has Jesus arrested and taken to jail. And the Grand Inquisitor is the head of the church. This is Inquisition time. So says to Jesus, why did you come? People are scared. They're behaving properly now because they're scared. And society's running in order, and the church has its place. And now you're messing it all up, Jesus, by coming and teaching love. How could you do this to us, Jesus? Everything is working fine, and now you're coming teaching love, and we no longer have complete control anymore. And at that point, Jesus turns and kisses the Grand Inquisitor and gives him love. But it's a wonderful story that is so relevant to this question. Yes, to get some order, sometimes we may have biblical injunctions, Vedic injunctions, just to kind of keep us there. But the real essence is love. And when there's love, as Krishna says to Arjuna, we rise above all these injunctions. Now, I've seen devotees sometimes think, oh, I love Krishna. Krishna loves me. I don't need to follow anything at all. But that's hubris. If you're very advanced, then there are no rules and regulations. You're not advanced. We have some rules and regulations, but these are there because we want to voluntarily follow them to raise our consciousness. That's the best attitude. And if we're following them because I'm scared if I don't follow them, I won't get my quota of sense gratification, or I'm going to get, the bird of fortune is going to fly over my head and put their droppings on me, or, whatever my fear is. That's good. At least you're following, but that's not Bhakti Yoga. This is the Bhakti Yoga Center we're at now. Bhakti Yoga means we're aspiring to get to the platform of love, but we're not there yet, so we know we need some rules and regulations to work. That's the mindset, and we find in every religious tradition. If you go to the Sufis among the Muslims, and you go to the teachings of the actual teachings of Jesus, or you go in Deuteronomy to the Bhakti Yoga section, we find that theme is always there, and the deviation from that theme is more as the populace gets in the mode of the lower modes of nature. There's some deviation of fear introduced. It's just like we have the different rasas with God, and none of us are aspiring for the relationship with God out of fear. We want friendship. We want parental. We want even conjugal. But the awe and reverence stage That's the beginning stage. If one has no awe and reverence, and you're a neophyte, then you're going to be very offensive. So we need the awe and reverence stage that has a fear factor. But it is just a stage we pass through, and it cannot be the dominant theme. And if it's the dominant theme, then we're totally stuck. And with that, I've way run out of time, but I hope I've answered your question.
No, but wait. I didn't actually even get to my question.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll try to make this a compound question then. So, just to reiterate, would you consider the horrific things that we hear about in the fifth canto hyperbole? And my real question was, because I just read this in the 11th canto, 12th chapter, 2nd verse, where it says that if due to negligence, a Vaishnava does not fast on Ekadashi, then his worship of Lord Vishnu is useless and he will go to hell. So that sounds very heavy, especially if you're talking about Vaishnavas. You know, you're not talking about people, you know, like ordinary people, you know.
And give me the verse number on that.
Yes, it's 11:12:2.
Okay.
And it's in it's way in the middle of the purport.
I've read that, but I like having it in front of me.
It's way in the middle of the purport.
Okay.
Or actually, it's actually just a paragraph. Is the last line of the next to last paragraph.
Okay.
Of that purport.
Okay, yeah, it's taking me a little bit to pull it up. 11, 12, I'll ask Gorisharna to put it in the chat, and I click on it. We have, to me, when I first read that, I said that's kind of hyperbole. Lord Chaitanya only gave very few instructions. Very, very few. He had 8 verses and a few instructions, besides chanting Hare Krishna. And his instruction was, one of them was to follow Ekadasi. So in this purport, there is a push to follow Ekadasi. And there might be some hyperbole here, and it's overstated. I know when somebody is particularly sick, they may even have to eat whatever on the Ekadasi. It's not that you go to hell if you don't follow Ekadasi. So I take that as kind of somewhat. It's in a purport. It's not a verse. It's kind of just some emphatic.
No, it's a quote. It's a quote of Vedic literature. It's a quote.
Yeah, let me see. In which paragraph is that of the purport?
Okay, if you go to the second to last paragraph.
Okay,
and
down
then
there.
You go to and then you go to like the second to last line of that paragraph.
Oh yeah. Okay, it is furthest if I does not, then his worship. Yeah, I don't know what Vedic literature that's from. It could be a Karma Kanda section. To me, that's emphatic. We have to look, how do we examine Shastra? Well, it has to also make sense. And I don't know what literature it's from. It says due to negligence, not accident. And Lord Chaitanya said to follow Ekadasi, and if I'm just too lazy, negligence means too lazy to even think about it. Like I put up signs around my house, in the kitchen, Ekadasi, so I don't forget. So I put up some signs. But if I forget, and it happens, I have a piece of bread or something, just, as we say, space out, I don't think at all I'm going to hell. But if Lord Chaitanya said follow Ekadasi, and I don't really want to do it, it's not good for my spiritual life. But what does go to hell? Go to hell is an emphatic point. I mean, there's parts of New York City that if I went to, I'd feel I'm in hell. I've been in New Delhi in
You like the subway.
yeah, I've been in New Delhi in at the time of Diwali, and the air is this ugly yellow, and all the buildings are shimmering due to heavy air pollution, and a million people setting off fireworks, and farmers burning the rice stalks, and the worst air pollution in the world. A level of 200 or 300 is considered unacceptable, and it goes up to 1,000, and it's just so horrific. I mean, I feel like I'm in hell. Doesn't mean I'm staying in hell, but what it means is if I really just consider not a Kadasi important, Lord Chaitanya did, I'm chipping away at my devotional service. I would have to again pull out what is that Vedic literature, what is the exact Sanskrit, and when we do, and every time I've done it, it will become clear that we're dealing with some hyperbole, and the Vedic literature has hyperbole in it. That's fine. It's a literary technique. Prabhupada uses that literary technique of speaking in sometimes in hyperbole. So, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur confirms that there is hyperbole, and we can understand it that way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I assure you, if one time devotees came to Prabhupada, could we use asafoetida on Ekadasi? Now, asafoetida is not a grain, but inside the containers of asafoetida, they put little bits of rice grains, just whole grains of rice, because that absorbs the moisture and prevents the asafoetida from caking. Just like if you drop your cell phone in your sink, the first thing you should do is turn it off and put it in a bag of rice, because the rice absorbs the moisture and it may not fry it out. By the way, that's never worked for me. But anyway, that's what folks recommend you do. So you put that. So there's a little bit of rice, and so devotees felt they couldn't cook with asafoetida because there's little rice. They're not even eating the rice. The asafoetida might be touching a rice grain. And Prabhupada said, we're not the International Society for Rules and Regulations. He considered that fairly fanatical. Now, there are some people I know who are overly strict, but that's what they need for their own spiritual life. So if somebody is very, very strict on these points, I don't find fault in them. It's what they might need for their spiritual life. What I do find some fault in, if they start telling other people, oh, you had some asafoetida, you're going to hell for a long, long time. Do not pass purgatory. Go directly to hell. It's a one-way ticket. Even Monopoly Board lets you get out of jail, but this way you never get out. I mean, that's absurd. It makes no sense. It's not true. So this particular verse is a good example of some hyperbole. And from a scholarly point of view, we'd have to see. I was with Hridayanand Raj when he was writing the purports on the 11th canto, because I was managing the BBT division that produced the books. And I don't remember having a conversation on this particular one, but I remember him saying to me very clearly that Lord Chaitanya gave very few instructions. One was to follow Ekadasi. So he was urging people. He says, yeah, we have to seriously follow Ekadasi. So I can ask him about this, because either he or Gopi Pranadhana might have pulled up that Vedic references. One of the two of them did it, and what was it, and what's the context. And if you like to cut that in a paragraph and write a letter to him, he'll answer you very specifically what was the literature, what's the context, what's the meaning of it. And that's a devotee's duty. When we come across these things, just like you did, now, when we come across them, doesn't make sense to us, we ought to ask about it and discuss it. And when we do, it always becomes deeper. This is the meaning of Istagosti, where devotees get together and say, that doesn't make sense to me, and we dig deeper and discuss it. So you've asked a very very important question today. I appreciate you doing that. And I see my friend Yudhisthira just turned on his video. My dear friend Yudhisthira. Hare Krishna, Yudhisthira.
Guru
Good to see
Sadhu
you.
Shastra. Good to see you. Guru Sadhu
Yes,
Shastra.
exactly. That's how we learn things. We have to take Shastra, but we see, what did the sadhus say about this? And what's our guru say about it? It all has to make sense. So I've gone way over time, but I started late, with my apologies. And nice to see you all.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for your
Hare Krishna. Thanks, Gaurasharana.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. His Grace Brahma Tirtha Prabhu